start of it. I mean, after that, we're going to take it and we're going to turn it into something that you could consider for approval. So I just want to, reiterate that the whole purpose of a work session is to study issues. It's not to take action. There's no action going to be taken today. It's just brainstorming. I mean, the issue with local government or any government, you get a minimum 4 of our decision makers together, it's got to be public. A lot of people can't relate to that in terms of private industry. You could go behind closed doors and talk about whatever you want in the privacy of your boardroom, and you don't have to have the entire world looking at you while you're making decisions. So I think it's worth noting that that's all this is a brainstorming session. So before we get going, a lot of the narrative has gone around the last few months around short-term rentals. A lot of it stems from a draft ordinance that was put together by one of our local business owners, Rick Elliott Realty, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. A lot of it's very similar to the stuff that we've put together. But at the end of the day, I talk about ideas. We put forth our ideas. Sometimes we kind of get in our own echo chamber of what we think makes the most sense and kind of lose sight of the ideas of the general public or local business owners. So I thought this was a good opportunity to bring in Elliott Realty and let them kind of show you what they've put together and kind of explain why they think this is the best path forward. And staff has had that for a while, so we've had time to research it and look at it. We know where the challenges are and where some of the things that they're proposing might be a problem. But like I said, we've already researched it, we've looked at it, so we're prepared to kind of share that information with you after they present what they would like to see in a local ordinance addressing short-term rentals. So with that being said, talked to Brandon Cox with Elliott Realty. He's prepared to give a presentation today, and I think we've got it all keyed up. So Brandon, the floor is yours. Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, no problem.
Mayor, Council, appreciate the opportunity to speak today on this really important matter. Just want to start out by saying that we have provided the local draft responsible local agent ordinance in its entirety to the council for them to review, but in the interest of time today, this is really meant to hit some of the highlights of what that proposal looks like. I also want to start out by saying that this was really a collective effort. A lot of eyeballs, a lot of inputs from a lot of different sources went into creating this draft. Attorneys, Case Managers Association, which is a national organization, their advocacy arm, they are invested in making sure that short-term rentals work for communities and work for business. So they were a wealth of information, and they've looked at it and approved. And they have the vantage point of seeing what's happening in other communities and trying to bring that to bear. So there's a lot of thought, energy, and effort. We offer this draft in the spirit of sort of helping to be a participant in solving an issue, which is what you want any good business community to do, right? So appreciate your time. With that, I'll go into a little bit of background, telling you things that I know that the council already knows and a great many people listening today already know as well. Short-term rentals are an incredible part of the North Myrtle Beach economy. They generate accommodations, taxes, all of which flow through to the city budget. We are a tourism-based economy. We all know that. Several years ago, the city entertained a comprehensive short-term rental ordinance plan, and I think, as I said last time, rightly rejected that to sort of say what really is the issue. Let's zero in on those things that actually present problems as it relates to short-term rental. And those, while they're not incredibly prevalent, those things ended up being parking, noise, and trash. Well, those are the three that the city rightly focused on in a targeted kind of way. And the city is to be applauded for its efforts from my perspective on that front. So the city passed a new parking ordinance that said for short-term rentals you have to designate the number of parking spaces that go with that short-term rental, and that became part of North Myrtle Beach law. You shored up the noise ordinance. For trash, you ended up including additional pickup season when trash is at its heaviest, and all those things have really helped tremendously, so you're to be applauded for that. Ryan mentioned, really I think it's right, this is a workshop, it's about bouncing ideas off. I think some of the ideas from the last workshop just won't work for our community, and I think we've moved past that, but appreciate the opportunity to speak here. Most short-term rentals, I think it's important to note, are not occupied all year round. It really depends on the rental and the type, but on average 120 or so days a year. All those other times of the year, there's really nobody there to present any of the issues that we might be talking about here that a responsible local agent would need to respond to in the first place. So what is the problem? How do we intend to solve it? It should be said that the majority of visitors who come to North Myrtle Beach respect our city. We all have occasion to go on vacation. I know when I go on vacation, I treat the place that I'm visiting like it's my home, and the vast majority of people do. With that being said, if problem safety's put in a really tough spot. They're called and they're essentially made a de facto rental manager to respond to issues that really should be handled by somebody who's actually involved in the rental transaction. That ties up city resources. That's something that we want to kind of curtail here. With the right to rent in the city comes the responsibility to handle those problems. And I've said it before, but professionalism really is the answer here. So this ordinance will help to bring all short-term rentals into compliance and improve the quality of life for residents while protecting the property rights of second homeowners, which is incredibly important. The aim of the draft ordinance is simple. It's to craft a simple solution that requires someone who is one, local, and two, who has met a minimum level of professional standards and that they'd be designated to respond to issues when they arise. Talked about the importance of short-term rentals as it contributes to the tax base in the city. Here you'll see 2022 North Myrtle Beach property tax rolls. Importantly, 79% of the property tax that's collected in the city of North Myrtle Beach is collected from second homeowners. So second homeowners are disproportionately contributing to those property tax rolls. The flip side of that coin is that permanent residents are only paying 21% of property tax. So short-term rentals in the city of North Myrtle Beach keep property taxes low. So just want to talk a bit about the highlights of the draft ordinance. There's been a lot of misinformation, I would say, out there. Airbnb has sent out some communications that would indicate that this draft ordinance and what the city is contemplating here would require that people have a professional rental management company. There are other avenues to be in compliance with this draft as we see it that fall short of that, so it's really misinformation. I just want to point that out at the start, but we will walk through it. So all short-term rentals within the city limits would be required to designate a responsible local agent who meets the following requirements. First, they have to be available 24/7 by phone and to be physically present at the short-term rental within 1 hour if necessary. Second, there's nothing that would stop an owner from designating themselves as the responsible local agent, provided that they can meet the 1 hour response time requirement and that their primary residence is located within a 30-mile radius of North Myrtle Beach, therefore making them local. If you're not a local homeowner, there's two avenues that you could take to be in compliance with the responsible local agent draft as we see it. In either case, the principal place of business of that entity must be within a 30-mile radius of North Myrtle Beach, and they must be licensed with the South Carolina Real Estate Commission as either one, a real estate brokerage firm, so that would be your professional rental management company who's handling all aspects of a rental on behalf of the homeowner. They're securing guests, they are providing accounting functions and therefore paying all appropriate taxes, and importantly here, they are able to respond if there is an issue. If you don't have a local professional rental management company that's managing your rental, there's still another avenue that you could take that would make you in compliance with the draft ordinance as we see it. And that would be designating an individual who holds a valid, active property manager license with South Carolina Real Estate Commission, which we'll talk a bit about later. A lot of folks have said, what does it take to become a licensed property manager in the state of South Carolina? So I just wanted to quickly list what those requirements are so people can understand what that bar is. Certainly it's a little bit of work, but it's not an incredibly high bar to clear. Importantly, you must be 18 years old. You have to have a high school diploma or a GED. You must complete a 30-hour commission-approved property management course. There are lots of companies in the area who provide the appropriate class that is commission approved. You can take those classes in person, you can take them online, you can take them via Zoom, whatever meets your learning style. You have to pass a South Carolina property manager's exam, and within 1 year of passing that exam, you have to apply for a license with the state. Importantly here, you have to undergo a background check. This is a pretty normal requirement for any job that any of us may get and apply for, particularly when you have a duty of a responsible local agent that involves visiting a short-term rental, that it may be occupied or unoccupied. There are personal belongings there. There are people. It would be disqualifying for you to have a criminal record or perhaps be on a sexual offender registry. That just creates some potential liability. Then you submit your application and your certificate to SCLLR Real Estate Commission, and that is good for 2 years. And after 2 years, you would then have to renew. Why is having minimum qualification standards for the responsible local agent? Why does it matter? For some really important reasons. The first of which is by requiring that minimum level of professional standards, this individual, whether it be the brokerage firm or the individual licensed property manager, they've demonstrated that they understand the laws in the state of South Carolina that govern short-term rentals. And that's important if you intend to play any role in the process for short-term rentals, that you understand the law that governs the thing that you're doing, right? It doesn't happen often, but in some circumstances, the answer to a problem, the way it's resolved, is that you end somebody's stay, you evict them. If a problem rises to that level, it's important that the responsible local agent needs to have the authority by law to do so. It can't just be someone that you designate. There has to be some sort of teeth around this person showing up to say, I am ending your stay at this rental, and that's an important piece of the puzzle. Finally, without any standards at all, local contacts could create liability for owners in the city, which we talked a bit about earlier. In addition to those core requirements, these are some really important ones as well. The idea is that there would be a good neighbor brochure that really was an education piece to short-term rental guests who come to our city. So it's going to tell them all about those appropriate laws that they need to know about, parking, noise, trash. There may be others that are important. So the city would produce that brochure, and that way everybody who's visiting our city would get the same consistent information across the board. And if something changed within the communication piece, the city would update it and everybody would get the update, and everybody's on a consistent messaging platform. This, I think, would solve a lot of problems. You can't expect guests to our area to comply with laws they don't know exist. So if everybody's not sharing what is expected of them when they come here in a consistent way, then of course you're going to get some disparate compliance across guests to the city. Most guests want to do the right thing. Secondly, the draft, it really doubles down on the requirement that short-term rental requires you to have a business license to operate in North. in other parts of the North Myrtle Beach Code of Ordinances, but it doubles down on it here so that when you move to the violation and penalty section of this draft ordinance, that it would trigger additional penalties, which says, it would say that this city is serious about making sure that you have to have a business license in the context of a short-term rental. Finally, a register publicly of short-term rentals in the city would include the address of the property, the responsible local agent, and their contact information, so that public safety, city staff, residents would be able to consult that publicly available registry, and if there was an issue, they would know who to call. They could call the responsible local agent first. Lots of issues can easily be resolved that way. If somebody's car's sticking out into the sidewalk, a phone call can correct that issue. If someone's being a little too loud outside of the noise ordinance requirements, a phone call is often all it takes to fix that. But if public safety needs to be involved, public safety would also know who to call as it relates to that responsible local agent. And if you have neighbors who are seeing that, short-term rental activities happening at a property that they don't find on the registry, certainly we would encourage them to call the city and let them know so that they could be brought into compliance and get pay appropriate taxes and all the fees that the city really needs to support the budget to provide the services that short-term rentals require. How do we intend for this information to be collected? There's already an existing business license application. There's within that application, term rental called rental questions. So took the liberty of mocking up what that modified flow would look like if this draft ordinance passed as written, just to provide that information for you. It starts out by just saying, this is what the requirement of the ordinance is. And then you have those three options. You either say, I've got a professional rental management company, in which case you list them, their contact information, and the South Carolina Real Estate Commission office license number that they hold. Or if you don't have a professional rental management company, you would list an individual who has a valid property manager license, and you would list their name, their contact information, and their individual license number with the South Carolina Real Estate Commission. Or if you were an owner who was local and your address was in the 30-mile radius of North Myrtle Beach, and you were willing to say, I'm going to be available 24/7 and I'll be there within an hour, then you as the homeowner, a local homeowner, could designate yourself. So it just takes the requirements of the ordinance and puts that into the business application workflow that already exists. Staff at the city would then receive that application, and they would go to the online LLR license lookup verification just to button it up to say, hey, the office license number that this person put down for this person or this company that they are having professionally manage their rentals actually checks out on LLR, and that ties back to the same company. Frankly, some people who feel like they are being professionally managed are being managed by companies who don't actually hold valid licensure at the state level. Unbeknownst to the individual homeowners who think, I like these folks, it's a company, but if they don't hold the license, then they're operating outside of the law. If it's an individual who has a property manager license, you will be able to see whether they're active and valid with that individual license number, if that's what you so choose. So what happens when things go wrong? So in the violation section, they're divided into three categories. The first is the major administrative violation, and those would include operating the short-term rental without any business license, or failure to pay all required taxes, or failure to designate a responsible local agent. Second is a major operational violation, and that would include failure to respond to the city staff or public safety within the required hour. And finally, minor violation, a failure to provide this good neighbor brochure that the city would produce to your guest. The penalties, which would cover a consecutive 12-month period for violations that happen within that 12-month period, are divided into the same three categories. So a major administrative violation results in fines that cap out at $2,000 by the third offense. A major operational violation, fines that cap out at $2,000 by the fourth offense. And a minor violation, fines that cap out at $1,000 by the fourth offense. It should be noted that the draft ordinance also includes an appeal procedure. And as I said at the top, this is a draft. It's meant, and a lot of work went into it. I think it really checks a lot of the boxes. But this is a conversation, like Ryan said. This is a workshop. That's what it's for. Ultimately, this is at council's discretion about what they think is important for the city to pass. There may be room in the penalty section for something beyond escalating fines for those folks who really just don't get it and continue to violate that warned and paying fines. But a lot of work went into it. I trust and hope that this will help guide the city in helping solve this problem. We want to be a part of that solution. And with that, I will open it up for any questions that you may have.
One question I want to ask about property management and how they can get licensed to be a property management agent. Just how long what's an average time it would take for a property management company to become licensed?
The courses that are out there, some of them are designed to just go ahead and just get it all over with, and others kind of spread it out over a couple of night courses.
Right.
But it's really, 2 weeks of night courses for a relatively small amount of money, and then you have to pay the state when you apply for your license, and then you're properly licensed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, I see possibly staff having some meetings with the parties involved, like we did with the beach ordinance. We're looking at this, some of us, for the first time. I think it's got some teeth. I like a lot of the things I see here. I like that if I own the property, I can continue to do it myself if I meet these requirements. So I think this is a great start. And I'm not in favor of any heavy-handed approach. We know that short-term rentals are our lifeblood. We're all in the accommodations business. Mm-hmm. So appreciate you taking time to inform us with this, and look forward to staff and not just Elliott Realty, but the other parties involved meeting and coming up with something that we can put our teeth into.
Yeah. Appreciate that. I think it really strikes the right balance here. So
I'm with Councilman Collins on that. I do appreciate. I know y'all put a lot of time willingly to kind of help guide a little bit. I too think that we have done a great job as far as with our trash, parking, and noise. As I said at the first workshop, I think it's extremely important to have the local representation, whether it's a professional or a homeowner. I do have a question. I don't know if it's, and I don't see the chiefs, so I don't know if it's going to be Chris. What happens if an officer is dispatched to a rental any time of the day, really, or late at night, and they get there for noise or whatever reason, and the tenants in there won't let them in the house? There's no registered, or there's nobody there that legally can represent that property. What would the police do? They can't enter that property, can they, without a warrant?
Well, first of all, do we have a representative from the police department present? Johnny, are you prepared to?
So, if they show up, if it's for a noise violation or something like that, if the officer doesn't hear anything, they'll document it with our dispatch, and then they'll leave if nobody's there to let them in, if they have no legal authorization to get in. If it's something that we think there is an issue, like an emergency issue, then we can make some emergency entries into a residence or a location just to make sure nobody is injured or something else like that.
Okay.
So otherwise, there's not much more we can do to that.
So if there's a house party, it's clear there's a house party, but nobody will let you in the building. You can just basically make entry on your own?
No, not for a house party, because
Okay.
that's not,
Now-
not unless we get a call saying that there's somebody possibly injured or there's somebody with a firearm at that location, then we can make entry just to make sure that the safety of the folks are there.
What if we have a response person that either was the homeowner or somebody that legally represents the homeowner, would they be able to let you into that residence?
They could if they were available, but most of the time, folks are not available at 2 in the morning, 1 in the morning.
Right.
So it's usually the next day that we're having to contact folks and try to.
So the house party would just continue, especially what you're
That's
telling me.
exactly right. And it's, quality of life for the neighbors who are permanent residents becomes an issue.
That's my problem.
So, during Memorial Day this past year, we had, one house party that there was probably 150 folks outside.
Okay.
So we showed up, told them they were not allowed to do that and they needed to go.
So you would have to have some kind of legal representation there to let you enter that house, if it wasn't an emergency.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And they would be 24 hours. That, I mean, if we do this with a new ordinance, we'd have the property management or the licensed rental company. They would have to have somebody 24 hours that could answer this call in 24 hours a day.
Somebody who has the authorization
Right.
to provide.
I personally think an hour is too long. In an hour's time, a lot of things can go away. And I think it's too long for us to ask our police officers to stand at a house and wait for somebody representing the real estate companies or the management companies to arrive. So I personally think we're gonna have to shorten that.
And
me
to
ask
be
you a
clear,
question,
I'm
officer.
not saying it would need to be a professional. I'm also saying that the homeowner as well would be able to respond for y'all and let y'all in. I'm not.
Right.
Yes, for that
Right, the
specific
homeowner.
example I was providing, we contacted the homeowner the next day because the house was rented through Airbnb. And that homeowner was able to contact Airbnb and speed up the process of having the folks moved out of there.
But there was no one local to really handle.
I can't remember where that gentleman lived. I think he was here within the county,
Okay.
but like I said, it was the next day before we were able to find his information
I
and
see.
contact him.
Mhm. Okay,
That feels like a really good example for what the whole ordinance is meant to solve. right?
exactly. Exactly.
Normally, I would not interject in the middle, but I know Jolene Puffer had an issue similar to this, and she was very complimentary to Dana and our police department in helping her. So
But I just want to comment that most Airbnb owners and short-term rental owners have cameras. I have cameras, so I know if there's more than the people that are accounted for, which is what led to the ultimate eviction of the people that were in my home because they were not being good neighbors. I know most Airbnb owners, or at least short-term rentals, have cameras. So I would say that's an extra layer of precaution. I just didn't know if that was being mentioned, and I know you all have all that information. But I thought it was important to note that many of us have cameras and we're watching those cameras so we can get help.
I appreciate those comments, Jolene, but we haven't opened it up for public comment at this time. We are within our council workshop.
Workshops, according to Robert's Rules of Order, do allow for comments. So
I can allow for comments, and I will allow for comments, but not at this time.
I understand that.
Okay. So, I personally like the idea of having a licensed agent, real estate agent, or a licensed property management agent to manage short-term rentals. And I think we should add that to our ordinance.
okay, so,
I
and
think that's one thing we need to decide. Let's start talking about what we want to decide and do.
yeah, I think from the staff point of view, when we discussed it, now there's something very similar in Folly Beach. They have it as I believe, a realtor, a brokerage firm, or an attorney. This takes it one step further, which might be a little too restrictive. And again, this is just our immediate concern. It listed as a real estate brokerage firm and not necessarily a realtor or a realtor. So what you're looking at there is if you have and this is just my interpretation, if you have a let's say, a realtor who works for himself, or he's I guess if he was a broker in charge and had his own brokerage, he would be okay. But if you're just a licensed realtor who doesn't necessarily work for one of these large brokerage firms, they would not necessarily be allowed to fit this requirement. Now, I could be wrong, but that's just the way that we read it. It seems a little bit more restrictive than what like Folly Beach's ordinance.
I think what we're trying to get to is, I think with Mr. Cox was talking about, is that if you got a property manager's license, you can be a independent contractor and not have to be associated with a firm, and you can do that business. And,
Right, on the property manager side, but when it comes to the realtor,
well,
it
you
has
know,
to
we
be-
don't, we're talking about here though, not going to that level. I mean, we're talking about and what's being proposed is the minimum level, which would be, you wouldn't have to have a regular real estate brokerage license. You could be just a property manager, and you could be a sole proprietor,
yeah,
and in that, and which would be the 30-hour course.
okay. Yeah, I mean, that would it'd be a moot point if we're not considering realtor, we're just considering property manager. Then that wouldn't be an issue.
So I think in your example there, the broker in charge would be a real estate brokerage. They couldn't operate without actually having both.
Well, I'm saying if they were a
an
realtor that
individual-
was like a single realtor who was the brokerage in charge for they're a one-man operation, they would qualify.
They would.
Yeah.
They are both an individual who holds licensure with the South Carolina Real Estate Commission. The commission would be a broker in charge. They would have to associate that license with an office. So they would have both an office number. They would actually check 2 of the categories in them.
Got it.
But yes, they would be allowed to be a responsible local agent, to simply answer your question.
Chris, you want to weigh in on it?
Yeah, if I can. excuse
Sure.
me. The section that staff and the applicant is referring to is qualifications of local real estate agent. It's on the first page of the proposed ordinance from Elliott Realty. And it has language listed, non-owner responsible local agents must be licensed by the State of South Carolina Real Estate Commission as either 1, a real estate brokerage firm, or 2, who has a valid active property manager license as defined in South Carolina Code Section 40-57-30. That comports with constitutional and legal requirements. In other words, that's going to pass legal muster in its this does comport with constitutional and legal requirements, except one provision that I think we probably should change. As council may be aware, council shouldn't pass an ordinance that could potentially interfere with interstate commerce. We are adjacent to another state, and that state is North Carolina, obviously. And this proposed ordinance has language that says they have to have a residence within 30 miles of the city of North Myrtle Beach. Although 30 miles does get you into North Carolina, a court may find that that's too restrictive and that it violates the Interstate Commerce Clause because it doesn't really meaningfully allow a fair number of North Carolina real estate agents to become property managers in our state, and the court may say that interferes with interstate commerce, this distance requirement. It probably would make more sense to have more of a temporal or time requirement, such as an hour. And I know that you were opposed to an hour's time frame, but it may be something we want to give further consideration to because it may benefit us from possibly successfully defending a claim that the ordinance violates the Interstate Commerce Clause if we have that hour time frame in there to allow a business to be located in there. If it's less than that, a court may find that it's too restrictive and possibly violates. But it's something that we could give consideration to when developing this and working with the community regarding the details of the ordinance.
Well, my concern about an hour is we're taking up a police officer's time. Sit and wait for an hour for someone representing this short-term rental to arrive.
And I think staff can work with the police department and the community about how we could potentially manage that. I don't have the solution right here, but I think that we could possibly come up with some. And the police department may be able to kind of anecdotally explain what happens with majority of fairly quickly, and that they don't have to wait. There are an occasion or occasions that do occur where they do have to wait for a period of time. And I don't know if you want to weigh in on that.
Normally, we would annotate it, and we may depart the area and not wait for someone to call back or for follow-up be conducted the next day or in daylight hours, business hours. But Mr. Norrie's correct that when we have like noise ordinance violations, we explain that to them, and or if we cannot find anyone to come to the door or discuss it with them about what the violation is, then normally we end up getting called back to the location. Sometimes even after we warned them, we get called back. So there's a lot of instances there where we usually explain the issue or annotate it, document it, and then do a follow-up to that call.
Okay. So you feel like we can work with a 1 hour?
Yes, ma'am, I think so.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Brandy, did your attorneys have the same opinion that Mr. Nuri had about the interstate?
Some of them are actually here, so they'd probably be able to speak to it before they do, if you so allow. The thought of the time required, the distance, is that it really creates a situation where you're really just asking either the brokerage firm or the licensed individual property manager, or the homeowner for that matter, just to assert that they say that they live within, that it's physically possible for them to get here within an hour. There wouldn't be anything that would stop somebody from who lived in Columbia checking the box on the business license application and saying, yes, I attest that I can respond within an hour. There's no test that actually makes them truly local, which is why we included both the time piece, to your point about needing a resolution in a timely manner, and to the distance, to make sure that there's some way to ensure that they're actually local. I'm certainly not an attorney, and so I understand there's some concerns about how it may play with interstate commerce. I don't know if it's up to you to have someone who may be able to speak to that.
Well, that's something, we have attorneys that we can talk to about that, but, I trust he knows what he's talking about.
And counsel, I have been working with outside counsel on some of these issues, and that was one of the issues we discussed.
Okay.
And we will certainly work with the attorneys for the proponents of the ordinance and try to get something that's workable for everyone, but is also hopefully beneficial to the city, and that it won't cause issues regarding the interstate commerce clause. One of the other concerns that I have about the proposed ordinance is the penalties section, and that's on page 4 of the proposed ordinance. And this is a tiered progressive set of fine amounts that would be imposed under the proposed ordinance. But the problem there is that our municipal court, by state code under section 14-25-65, only allows the imposition of a maximum fine in the amount of $500. It does not allow for fines in the range of $1,000 or $2,000 as proposed under this ordinance. So that area would have to be tweaked to address the maximum penalties allowed by statute under the South Carolina Code. There's also a bit of an inequitable treatment that I want to call your attention to regarding penalties for violations from the renters, and then the violations regarding false complaints. And if you'll look on page 5, there's a section regarding false complaints, and it basically says, any individual who is determined to have knowingly filed a false complaint shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, and upon conviction shall be punished in accordance with Chapter 1, Section 1-6 of the city's Code of Ordinances. That penalty allows for a fine of up to $500 and/or incarceration for up to 30 days. The other set of penalties for violation of the rentors only allows for fines. So that's something we probably want to carefully look at to make sure that there's equitable treatment regarding the violations of false complaints and the companies or the individuals renting out properties who violate the provisions of this ordinance or the proposed ordinance, to make sure that they're in effect fair.
Yes. So people who make false complaints,
Yes, in other words, if you live next door.
they can be charged $500.
Well, if you live next door to a short-term rental and there's house parties or whatever, or you phone in a complaint that there's a house party and there's not one, so it's a false complaint because the individual who lives next door doesn't necessarily like short-term rentals next to them.
Right.
And I'm just providing an
And
example.
I
I'm not
understand.
saying that happens. But if someone did make a false complaint under this proposed ordinance, under the penalty section, that person will be subject, if they're convicted, to being fined up to $500 and/or being incarcerated for a period of 30 days. The other penalty sections of this ordinance that apply to the owners or the rental company, that only provides for a fine system with no period of incarceration.
Right.
So it's unfair
It
treatment.
is unfair.
Yeah, and that should be revisited, and something a little more fair, more equitable, probably should be put into place if council is going to pass an ordinance that regulates short-term rentals.
Well, you could take that out and just make it a fine.
We could.
And I had a question, and Brandon, maybe you might want to answer this, but I get the local agent idea, because just like we talked about, if the police get there and somebody won't open the door, won't communicate with them, or won't stop, there's not much they can do till the next day. So this could curtail that, but what would be those steps? So we talking about signage with a number on every rental unit, a number for the local contact? Would the police officer make that call because he can't get somebody to answer the door, or because he can't get them to stop the party?
Question, this ordinance does not contemplate signage. The way that we achieve that in our draft ordinance here is through the publicly available registry. And so if passed as written, the idea is that the city would have some communication pieces to residents and to make them aware that there's a publicly available registry and what its use case is. So either the person who wants to lodge a complaint, it's really up to the resident about how they want to approach it, but they could, and I would argue that it's probably more efficient for them to reach out to the responsible local agent, because as I said earlier, a lot of problems are minor, and a phone call is all it takes to resolve the issue. But if the resident so chose, they could call public safety as well. Public safety would consult the publicly available registry and see who the responsible local agent is and call them in order to respond. And then if the situation was of a nature that it required a physical presence, public safety would ask that of the responsible local agent, and they would be required to respond within an hour. So the resident can call either the responsible local agent or public safety, whatever they choose. The goal of the ordinance is to provide a resolution to the problem, right? However you get there.
So this is another area where we see a little bit of an issue, because, so with the registry, that would be populated through information that is derived from the business license applications, which that would be a conflict because there's only so much information we can give out, contact information not being one of them. So I don't know how we would go about populating this registry without going and asking for some other permit or something else outside of the business. Couldn't provide it based on those applications.
Well, now let me ask this, in the business license application, could we not have a box that if you're doing a short-term rental and you're the registered agent, that whoever the representative, that they agree to allow the publication of the contact information?
Sarah, I mean, this is your wheelhouse.
Another thing, I had a concern, and I talked to Sarah, and if I remember this correctly, y'all were linking the police department with your business license department, so at night they can access the information to get that point of contact's number, correct?
Yes, so I'll answer Trey's question first, or his point. At the time of application, we do ask for a 24-hour emergency contact from every applicant. That's in addition to an owner. We don't require that person to be able to respond on site, but we do get that information. That information is shared with dispatchers and other command staff within the police department and other city departments if they have public works issues or other issues that they need to contact somebody to assist them with something they can. Well, contacts.
But that's not available to the public, though. That's internally.
It is not available to the public.
All right.
Correct. For what Hank's saying is, I believe everything on the business license application is protected by Act 176 that was passed in 2020 with business license standardization. So anything on the business license application, I don't think you can opt out and say, yes, you can release this information.
But at least public safety will be able to access it. And they can
Yes, and they
deal
do
with it.
now. They can now.
So that may be the best that we can do, possibly.
And then we also do have vacation management companies on that application too. So if you already have a designated company, their information is on that, accessible, in addition to that 24/7 emergency contact.
So I have a question. Legally, what would it be for us to have VRBOs and Airbnbs and all homes that are rented out marked with signage stating, you know, this is a VRBO property, the name of the house or whatever the property is with the owner's name and their phone number on it? Kind of already like some of our rental houses are marked in the city. They're identifiable. That way, if one of our police officers or our neighbors, residents, is happy with that home, they go out there and say, hey, and they can call that themselves or contact us to have that information.
When the city was contemplating passing a short-term rental ordinance several years ago,
Right.
that was one of the
We brought that up,
pieces
yes.
of that proposed ordinance back in the day. Most likely, the city could legally require the posting of a phone number and a contact company on signage associated with the house. I'll vet that and make sure that we're on solid ground for that, but most likely the city would have the authority to require that.
I think it would be a good start for us. Number one, for some of our neighborhoods that we have residents in, and like I stated before in the last workshop, we've had, you know, neighborhoods that are 30 years old or more, and then get an STR pop up next door to them, and they're not used to that. So, you know, sometimes I think it would just be good for them to have that information. They know who they can contact if there's an issue in the middle of the night. If they don't want to, call the police department, or they don't feel comfortable with doing that. And it is identifying that property as a short-term rental. And you'll know who it's through. It's either through Thomas Realty, Elliott Realty, or VRBO, or it is marked Airbnb, so that we know. And I think that should be a requirement that we start with, and a certain size sign that it is very visible to the public.
When staff brings this back to council, because most likely there's going to be some kind of hybrid of a draft from the city and a draft from the real estate business community, that element will be thoroughly reviewed and will provide background regarding whether this is legally sound to go forward with regarding the signage.
Well, I remember talking before in our first time around years ago, and, asking about putting the occupancy, or, how many bedrooms was on there, how many cars were to be parked, and all that kind of stuff, so.
Well, and I think that's a good idea. Most short-term rental houses, except for those who are in residential communities, and a lot of those do have a sign already.
Contact information. Correct.
Contact information already. So I don't see where it would be a problem to, and, we could even designate the size of the sign. You don't have to have a humongous sign
No,
out
just
there. But we could designate no larger than, a certain size.
Exactly.
And so that way, like you say, the people who are living in a R1 district, they will know, hi, this house has been sold for a short-term rental. And it will make a big difference for them, because they will know exactly who to call when it interrupts their life.
Correct.
Ultimately, really, probably one of the more helpful things for one of our officers on responding to a call, that the information's there automatically.
Yes.
And that they're not having, it's not having to go back through dispatch to go look up other things
Exactly.
too. So that may, ultimately kind of streamline that process. And I think
It would absolutely make that process more efficient for the police department to respond
Right.
efficiently to the complaint and contact the rental management company to discuss the issue and hopefully resolve it.
And that would help tie back into the timeline, or, the minimal amount, because it's not
Yep.
only that an officer being tied up, but it's also the neighborhood and the neighbors being disrupted, which is the real goal here that we want to accomplish to resolve.
And oftentimes, things can get resolved with a phone call as opposed to someone physically being present at the property. A phone call oftentimes can do the trick to get the matter taken care of.
There was another question I had.
Sure. On the signage piece, I just wanted to point out that some HOAs modifications to the condos would be short-term rentals as well, would be part of the ordinance. So a signage requirement would be difficult to implement in the context of an HOA that wouldn't allow that kind of signage at the property. I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's a failure for the real estate local agent, the responsible local agent's what I should say, to resolve the issue in a timely manner. If they can't resolve it, then what do we do?
So, there are penalties in here for the agent who is unable to perform the required duties of responding within an hour. So, we could still keep something like that, but the penalties that are tied to them, that's Chris talked about earlier. State law wouldn't allow us to do you know, put penalties in place that were as high as they're listed in here. But
Right.
we could revise that. I mean, we haven't really thought out the enforcement piece of this yet, and, you know,
Well, there has to be something in there if they can't resolve the issue. What if you have a party of 50 or more that say, no, we're not doing this, we're not leaving,
And Mayor, the applicant.
we're gonna stay right here.
As I said, this is it's a draft and this is a discussion, but certainly if somebody, to me, your hypothetical scenario sounds like, given, I assume this is a house party over occupancy, and a refusal to cooperate. I mean, those from our professional standards, that would be grounds for eviction at our company. So.
Well, I think that should be put in the ordinance.
Well, I think that is kind of what they're aiming at with
Yeah.
them being in a position where they have an agreement with the owners. They are in a position where they would have the authority. I mean, anybody who's going to seek to evict the tenants, it's not going to happen without the assistance of our law enforcement. I mean, no one's going to go and evict a tenant on their own. So in the very few cases where that takes place, yeah, I mean, they're going to get with our law enforcement, and they should be in a position where they have the authority to make that call, and this would solve that problem. I mean, you're going to have representatives that, if it's not the owner themselves, if it's the non-owner representative, they're going to be in a position where they have the authority to make decisions the same as an owner would.
And there has to be some discretion there. I think we've talked about this example in some of our previous discussions, but if you have a house party, you have folks who have been drinking, and your wish and goal might be to end someone's stay, it's probably not wise from a liability standpoint to force people who are intoxicated out on the road at that hour. You certainly should control the situation so that the problem doesn't persist, but the actual ending of the stay perhaps would happen the following morning when folks have had a chance to sober up. But my point in saying that is that there's got to be a little bit of discretion there about how the professional who's meant to handle the situation handles it. And I don't think anyone should be dictating that an eviction happen at 2 a.m. when it might present other circumstances and liability.
I mean, it's like,
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that part.
Yeah.
But I still think you should have ability to evict.
and I think the way this is written, that for the most part would be the case. And then like any other law that is passed, I mean, there is a certain level of discretion, like Brandon said, that those who are tasked with enforcing it, they're going to do what makes the most sense, and only they are going to know. We have to trust them to use their discretion to make the call that makes the most sense. And sometimes that's probably going to be eviction, sometimes that's going to be something else, as long as it solves the problem. I guess the point of this is to put ourselves in a position where we are in the best possible situation for solving these issues as they arise. I think this does go a long way. Again, there are some areas where we have a little bit of a conflict, but at the end of the day, I think we're all working towards the same thing. And if we were to sit down, work with Elliott Realty, Brandon Cox, Rick Elliott, I think we could kind of take what we had in the past,
Well, I
what they're
also
proposing.
think that a couple of more agencies should be asked to
Absolutely.
join.
The more the better.
Well, and I think that whole kind of scenario and conversation kind of brings back to home, and it took me a while to get a grip on, requiring somebody or possibly requiring somebody to be licensed, because it not only protects the city, the homeowner, but it also protects the guests that are there too.
That's right.
And I think that the end of the day, that's another one of our goals is that everybody's, treated fair and equitably here.
Well, to me, this is a great start. I mean, we heard from staff, now we're hearing from you guys. Like we did with the beach ordinance, you guys got together with everybody that this law is going to affect. And I think most people are happy with what we did with the beach. We know we're not gonna get everybody, gonna, will be happy, but this is a great conversation and start. Look forward to you guys getting together again and coming up with something that we think would work.
Yeah, look forward to continuing the conversation.
Well, I think at this time, we now just get the staff together, meet with some of the rental agencies and property management agencies.
Sure.
And try to iron out a new ordinance that will address the issues that we're concerned about. Is there any more questions or anything from the council or any other thing you would like to talk about?
Maybe it might be good, might be wise that if we could possibly have some individual homeowners that rent, that own short-term
I'm
rentals.
gonna ask-
involved
Yeah.
in that, in some of those
Okay.
conversations,
That's,
because I think we need to make sure that we're talking with everybody and the
Sure.
feedback is as balanced as we can possibly make it.
Sure. That's a good idea.
I think that's a good point.
If not, then I'm going to open it for a few comments from the public. If you want to make a comment, come to the podium. We have 3 minutes per person to speak. And Damon, you could speak first since you're up there.
Hi, everybody. Damian Triolaire, 902 Perrin Drive. Number one, I think it's really good that we're having this discussion. To be honest, I was shocked a little bit. On the one, I appreciate all the effort that you guys, Elliot, has gone into and working. I think it's particularly positive that you're working with our city. To me, that's the best thing to you, especially you guys are the largest realtor, right? And I think it's very positive that you work together with our city, with staff. But I was shocked personally. I'm a homeowner. I've been here 30 years. I have just started after people urging me for years. 2 years ago, I started an Airbnb. I am the manager of that Airbnb. It's my home, right below my house. I think there's got to be some exception. I don't think every person who's the responsible agent should have to go through a 30-hour course and every 2 years take a test.
David, that's not what the ordinance says. If
No.
you own the home, you don't have to do any of
No,
that.
if you own it, you can manage it.
If you own it, you manage it just like you are.
Okay.
As long as you can get there responsible.
Yes, okay, good. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. And
Yes.
I have another property I own that's about maybe 4 minutes away.
You can manage it.
I can manage that too.
Sure.
Yes.
So is this only, if you're a homeowner, then you can manage it yourself, is that correct?
If you're within a 30,
An hour or?
30-minute, yeah.
Wherever we end up with the hour.
Whatever-
or the
whatever
30 miles.
distance.
Whatever
decide.
we decide.
Yeah, I'm like, 5 minutes away from my other place.
Sure.
So,
I think the problem is when we have someone like out of state.
I got you. They live in Texas and they own a house here, something like
Yeah.
that?
100%.
So, okay, well, that's, certainly that is a huge difference. I appreciate that, because there's many of us who are local, who love this place, and it is our home. And we're homeowners, but we rent out a part. So,
Yeah.
that's,
So all you have to do when you fill out your business license is that you are representing yourself and you put your number down to
Yeah.
how, as the contact person.
I got you. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. I think that's fantastic then. And it's, to me, that's a very good compromise. So appreciate that.
Okay.
Good afternoon, good to see everyone. Madison Cooper with the Coastal Carolinas Association of Realtors. While we were not involved directly in drafting this ordinance, we do find it very middle of the road for most issues. We look forward to being a part of those discussions as we do represent almost 5,000 members of the real estate community. I would say, I think our chief issue, if you will, would be the word agent. Agent and realtor are often interchanged, although they are two very different things. Many people think they are the same. An agent can also, when people see agent, they often think realtor or real estate. So we would ask that that be considered contact or person if it is going to, which we agree with, allowing folks to manage their own properties. So we would ask that that be the first consideration there. Several of the legal things that you brought up we agree with as well. So I'll certainly send my notes to staff. No need to go through everything here, but we do appreciate you working on this with the community. Thank you. I just have to write my name.
Sure. My name is Michael Morgan. I'm a local short-term rental owner. I just had a question. Does this give the management companies an unfair advantage? Because it's saying that the owner of the house has to live within 30 miles, but it doesn't say anywhere from the management company would be present within 30 miles. So just like, say, Elliot or Thomas or whatever, if your employee's on call, what if that employee lives 45 minutes away or 45 miles away? Is that putting the limits on where the owner has to live, but not where the management company's employee that's going to be on call to answer that call at 2 o'clock in the morning, where they're going to have to live?
So, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, but I believe it says in there, it's the homeowner, obviously, an hour, 30 minutes, whatever it is that we determine that it will be, but it also says whatever that broker in charge, or the brokerage, I'm sorry, or wherever the base of operations for the property manager, that address is where it has to be within an hour, or whatever, again, is determined to be that time. So if you have an employee, I mean, ultimately, whoever you hire, I think, is responsible for it. But yeah, if you have an employee, that's a good question. You know, if you have an employee that you designate that responsibility to, and he happens to live in Outer Banks, whatever, you know, and like, oh yeah, I'll make it there. But, you know, I mean, these are the enforcement issues that we're going to deal with as we get into this, because, I mean, we've already brought up issues that we have with enforcement. We're already kind of stretched thin with it. So anything that we add, only going to stretch us thinner. So there are all these challenges that we've thought about as staff about how we would enforce it. This is another good question. Well, I don't think we've even thought about that.
So for the real estate brokerage firm, the distance requirement is on where the place of business for the brokerage firm is, but the time requirement still remains. If a real estate brokerage firm is not smart enough to designate somebody who can respond within an hour, they're exposing their homeowner to fines of up to $2,000, and that really wouldn't last for very long. So it sort of self-corrects in that way.
Yeah, but I guess it limits to me where I can live and own a property, but your employee that's technically on call, that's going to be a responsible agent, can live 45 miles away, but I can't live 45 miles away and own a property.
I would say that I agree with Brandon on that. I think any management company, if they have an on-call person and we have an ordinance that they have to be in a certain amount of time, they would have to. I know in our company, we would make certain that that person could meet those requirements, or they wouldn't be on call.
Thank you.
And back to the idea that, and this is a workshop. So I mean, even like if there's a way that we could better define what's expected in the ordinance, we can go ahead and do that. So I mean, just.
Hi, I'm a resident, and I do not have a property that is rented by, I do have one on our street, which is Tilson Road, and actually was managed by one of the real estate property management companies. And I just want to share my experience that I've had in the last 4 years. And it seems pretty frivolous when you're talking about big parties and everything, but it's a real issue when they leave it up to whoever's renting the home to take the garbage cans in and out. And I've always, at first, especially in the summer, those garbage cans sit at the curb or 10 feet back from the curb all summer long. Because as people come in and rent it, they see the garbage cans out there instead of back from the property. And so they think that's where they have to do. And I know that the management company will always text them to take the garbage cans out. They never get them back. They come in and they rent, they see the cans at the street. All of a sudden, you'll have parties with overflowing trash bags right at the street 7 days a week. And so I would like to open thoughts for such a thing as, I know you have garbage that comes twice a week for them, and they're required to do it, but there's also other cities we've lived in where they actually roll the cans back, and the people are charged for that. But it did take care of that, because if you think about how windy it is now, just in the last month, which is not season, this particular home had their garbage cans out at the street for 3 weeks. And it's been very, very windy. So even thinking of broadening it a little bit might be another solution that we could, the city could put in place. I think that it's the proposal that Elliot's made today has to, somehow there's a few questions I have about it, because I've experienced calling them and having them first of all, it took me a half hour of continually calling to get through to them, because they have their hands full with a lot of problems as people come in and out. So we would certainly want that addressed, that maybe having a second type of line where you can get through to them to let them know. But from the city's aspect, how are you going to monitor that half hour? How do you know when let's say I called in to say, hey, could you get a hold of these people to get their garbage cans back in? Like, where does that come into play? So those are the things that I think we might want to think about as you're going through this process.
And we do have a rollback service, just so you know. We do have a rollback service for trash.
I just know for 2 years I worked with it. And
Well,
it
that
wasn't
property
very-
might not be on it, but I was just letting you know, we do have a rollback.
Okay.
We do offer that. That property's just might not be on it.
Now, and that's something we may have to require.
Yeah, what I would encourage you to do is,
I
when the
think-
problem
I
is,
think you can't make it an option, you just
Yeah,
have to
but-
have it done.
but and these are things that, definitely deserve further consideration, but is when there are problems while they're happening, to notify us then. I mean, and I'm not saying you haven't already in the past, but I mean, there's not,
My biggest success is actually calling the safety department,
yeah.
and they've done really well, but I did try to work through the property management company just to keep things streamlined, and for 2 years, I did not have
I think so,
success.
too, 'cause they would-
Pretty indifferent. True work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Jean Bozeman. I live on Edge Drive, and I'd like to beg that you somehow or another help me in a situation. I have a house to me that's a very small house. At one time, they made one of the bedrooms into a bathroom. Now it's been made back into a bedroom. And we had, a couple of weeks ago on Friday, we had something like 15 or 20 teenagers, and I had to call the police. I have abused the police, I'm sure, and I apologize for that, because that's my background, that's where I worked. And then this past weekend, we had about 9, in the other group, we had 13 cars. And the cars were parked up and down the street. And I had to get the police to get them out. They put them in the backyard. And the backyard is bigger than the house. Then the next group was about 10 young boys. And they had a big fire. There's a little, in the back of the house, there's a little place about twice as big as right here, and about as long as from here to that sign, 12, maybe 14 feet. And they had a fire in there with a blaze higher than my arm will go. and I thought maybe the house would burn, and I almost wished it did.
Good. You got one. Thank you again for the proposal. That was great. I'd like to hear a little bit more. Thank you also, Fred, for asking to involve some of the small Airbnb owners, because I think we all want to be responsible. The concern I have about the signage, just something to be in consideration, is we would be perhaps more susceptible to squatters and/or theft of property. So perhaps maybe considering the size of the sign, I don't have a problem with that. I think it's always good to make sure your neighbors know who you are and how to get in touch with you, because it helps you as an Airbnb owner, obviously, if they have an issue. I haven't heard anything about revocation of license. I think if there are some bad Airbnb and/or short-term rental owners, I'd love for that to be on the table. It seems like the fines could continue over time, but if they're not going to be responsible owners, I'd like to see revocation in that. The other thing is we're paying $80 a month for service this month and through March when we're not receiving pickup service. Maybe somebody can explain that. I mean, we pay $80 a month as short-term rentals for pickup. It's 4 times a week in the summer, and it's zero other than the regular service once a week during the off-season. Now, Thanksgiving and Christmas have become big holidays, and there's a lot of trash, and it sits around for a long time. But I'm just curious why we're still paying for something, especially when there's concerns from the citizens about rollback service, and we're not receiving that service. So maybe somebody could.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be happy to like a further conversation with you outside of this forum, but a lot of it comes down to not everyone rents their short-term rental consistently at the same time, and it'd be an enormous
No, but
task.
I'm paying for trash now, the same amount, and not getting the same pickup service.
Well,
So
I know
this-
that we ramp it up.
No.
Yeah, I want to think that,
Well, I guess,
I do.
wait, and I have another question though. Wait, just real quick, I just want to add something to it, something to think about in revenue, for trash. I'm a 700 square foot home, I pay $80 a month. My neighbor has a 2,100 foot home, she pays $80. I have a friend that rents for 20 people, and she pays $80. So I just think there's maybe some opportunity, because I know the revenue there would be different as far as trash pickup and accumulation and size of home, and then obviously in this disparity in payment. So you can tell us about that.
As you're probably aware, the city sanitation services are an enterprise fund, so it's not covered out of the tax base. So the amount of money we charge on a monthly basis for that service equals the cost of us to provide that service. So the short-term rental collections is based on collecting during the peak season, that 5-month or so peak season rate, and collecting that trash 4 or 5 times per week based on check-in, check-out times at the various properties. Then that number is extrapolated over a 12-month period so that the rate is the same on a year-round basis. So if we were to charge the cost to pick that service up in the summertime, it might be for 6 months out of the year. And then maybe it drops back down to $40 during the other 6 months out of the year. But instead of changing the rates twice a year, we elected to average that cost and charge that throughout the year. If we were to go to a full year rollback service, there would be additional costs. We could certainly calculate those costs. And then the final question was based on square footage. We, of course, currently average our cost of collection for all homes citywide. It would be a pretty large undertaking to try and allocate that based on number of bedrooms or square footage or whatever the case was.
I think when you get a business,
we could look at that.
when you get a license, you get $80 on automatically, so perhaps during that business license, you know the square footage of the house because you're obviously getting the address, because I think you're losing revenue, or you're putting the cost basis on the smaller houses for the larger homes, because I know the larger homes produce a whole lot more trash than the smaller homes. So it may be an opportunity, a sliding scale, something to look at.
Programs out there with technology available, you could do some things like pay per throw, so you could pay per can you dump to each site. If you had the available technology to do that, we're not there yet. I know some people do that around the state and around the country, so it's something we'll be glad to look into.
I think it would be great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Debbie LaPierre. I'm a full-time resident. I do not have any rentals, but I'm one of the people who are affected by short-term rentals. And I just want to make sure that I did understand a while ago, y'all do plan to meet with those of us in my position, full-time residents who don't rent, so, but are affected by.
We're gonna have, on the group that's gonna meet to draft a new ordinance, we'll have some people who, it won't be everybody, but
Right.
it'll be some
Right.
people who are residents.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Hi, Dara Baltasconis, 4502 Grovecrest Circle. I only deal in short-term rentals anymore. This is a good start. I only deal with the local agent because I want my property protected immediately. That being said, what does concern me, you as council and mayor have the power to enact laws, to give the police and the fire department tools so that they can respond to this and be effective. There are plenty of tools. I know Jay and I have spoken with what I've done in other states, because I do have properties within 3 different states. If the police hands are tied, they can't do anything. But if you give them their tools that they need, laws in place, ordinances in place that they can enforce, maybe the third person in the middle wouldn't be so much of a hindrance and they could actually do their job. I was that cop at 2 o'clock in the morning responding to an Animal House situation. So I'm familiar with what goes on at 2 o'clock in the morning with the drugs and the alcohol and 50, 60 people in a 2-bedroom home in a tourist area. I've been there. The police need your help to do their job, and my request is to please give them the tools that they need. Thank you.
We'll take the last comment tonight.
Thank you. I'm Eric Reese. I've got a small property management company here in North Myrtle Beach. My concern, I guess, what they put together seems somewhat okay. I'm pretty much, some things need to be tweaked, but my concern is that we're enforcing this, but I think at one of the last meetings, there's 5,400 rentals and 1,700 aren't even registered. How are we going to combat that and make sure that everyone follows these rules? These rules are to be put in place, but if 1,700 people don't even abide by them, how are we going to enforce that?
So that's another thing that was in the media that was incorrect. So I said there was 5,400 rentals, 1,700 of which did not have a designated local representative. So we have the vast majority of our rentals are locally who have designated for issues that might arise from those properties. We have 1,700 that have business license. They're on the up and up. They do everything appropriately. They just don't have someone who's local as their 24-hour representative. Might be somebody that lives out of state. That's what we were referring to when we said 1,700.
Okay. So all Airbnbs in North Myrtle Beach have business license?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Oh. All Airbnbs that we know about.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, that we know about.
And look, it's very hard. It is very hard to catch those who don't. And I know that we have people who call in and say, my neighbor is renting their home, or 2 doors down, they're renting their home for short-term rental. I don't know if they have a license or not. Well, that gives us an opportunity to look at it.
But I would say, based on the response in this room, if anyone in this room knows of someone who's renting their house and does not have a business license, please notify us. I could promise you that any report that came to our office ratting out their neighbor the last thing we want is a community where you have certain people renting their house and operating at a competitive disadvantage to their neighbor because their neighbor's not doing it the right way.
Exactly.
So absolutely, 100%. In fact, I almost take pleasure in calling those people out. So please, seriously, yeah.
Yes, give us the addresses.
My name's Nancy Mickleberry. I live in the Dye Townhomes. Our community has been designating no short-term rentals. This was after people had been sold units that they were told they could short-term rental. They can't, so they're still renting. Some of them have business licenses and some of them do not. Probably 4 or 5 do not. Sarah has been kind enough to work with me on reporting these. But is any of this discussion gonna actually cover people who are renting that aren't allowed to? And how can we enforce that and make these people stop renting?
Well, is that not in your homeowners association?
It's going to be. It's with the attorney now, it's with Paige Bellamy now, to
Right.
change the master deed and the rules and regs.
Wasn't that in your contract that says you cannot rent?
No,
So we've been in your situation is so unique.
It is.
And it's something that's not going to be I can't say not going to be replicated anywhere else in the city, but it is such a unique situation. And we've been working with them. And yes, ultimately, it will get resolved. It's just not going to be as clean and clear as it would be anywhere else in the city. And I don't want to go into great detail about it because it is so absolutely unique to.
just please keep us in
And
mind.
you know,
2 units down from me is the 150 people party on Memorial Day that the officer was talking about.
Absolutely.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm very empathetic to what you're going through, and, you know, we're working to try and find a resolution.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. A lot of good discussion here today. I appreciate all of you being here. Is there anything else, Ryan, we need to discuss?
No, it's just, you know, this is a kind of fluid, ongoing discussion, and, you know, there's a lot of layers to it, and it's a very polarizing issue. You got folks on both sides of it, those who rent, those who live next to rentals. So we just want to make sure we cover all our bases and get all the different perspectives at the table when we craft this. So I think we're heading in the right direction, and we'll continue to work on it as staff, and when we have something or feel like we're in a position to bring it back to you.
And we need to do it in a timely manner because, you know, if we're going to send out pamphlets or whatever, we need to have them ready to go. Summer, spring is coming quickly, and the short-term rentals will all be filled up again, so
Yep.
we need to get this done immediately. Okay, then our workshop is over. Thank you so much.